All right. Well, we're moving on to our next session. We're continuing to talk about what is next in innovation. And we have something very special at hand now. We're going to be having a conversation with Mr. Janos Csak, who is or was a corporate leader. He served as the Minister of Culture and Innovation, also served as an ambassador of Hungary to the United Kingdom between 2011-2014. He is going to be in conversation about innovation with my colleague and news editor, Devika Chopra. Round of applause, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us at the NXT Conclave. When I was reading up on what is it that we should discuss and talk about, and of course the topic is next in innovation, it's very interesting that you were the Minister for Culture and Innovation. That's not a concept that we have yet adapted in India. I want to understand from your perspective, how does that work as far as the government's role is concerned? What does a Minister of Innovation really do?
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. Congratulations for this conference and best wishes for the future. My ministry was called Culture and Innovation Ministry. But in fact, I had many more functions. For example, family policies belonged to the ministry. University systems, research institutions belong there, and even vocational training. And I tell you why. Because in Hungary, when we talk about culture, we are talking about our way of life. It's not just pictures on the wall or music or art. But culture is passed on to the next generation through the families. Obviously, we have the schools, the churches, but predominantly it's the family. So the culture and the family should be hand in hand. And this morning we talked about a lot how a government can enable or support families or culture, that we don't lose what we want to keep. So therefore, you need economic prosperity. And in this fast-changing world, where does that come? From the education, from universities, where from the young people can go to corporate life, research life, university life, because through those people, through the elite, can the resources and the assets of a country be mobilized, and therefore produce added value, economic added value, which in turn is required to support your families and culture. So this is an angelic circle. And the government in Hungary decided that we have to have this holistic view represented in a portfolio in the government. And because in my life I worked in each and every field, I have 4 kids, 8 grandchildren, so I'm familiar with the family to start with.
That's such an interesting perspective, because you say that at the core of culture in Hungary is family and family values. And basis that comes the idea that innovation is critical, because that will lead to economic prosperity, which in turn helps and supports families across Hungary. That's such a brilliant concept, you know, and you've put it out so simply for our audiences to understand. I also want to just know from you then, what exactly does the job entail? How do you go about it when we talk about a ministry of innovation? What sort of innovation are you looking at? And I'll come to what next in innovation, but I want to understand what so far would you say have been some of the biggest success stories?
I think the role of a government is to facilitate what a government can do. The government can provide money to support ideas, infrastructure, or regulation. And the wise governments, in my opinion, build on the strengths, the existing strengths, what a country has. Last year, when I was still a minister, Hungary won 2 Nobel Prizes. Katalin Karikó for the mRNA, and Ferenc Krauss for capturing and picturing the subatomic particles. Well, they've been working on their field for 40 years or so, but it was my time when they got the Nobel Prize, so I take the credit for that. But anyway, so it means that the health sciences and life sciences and very strong way. So when first we started to think about how to improve our ecosystem in innovation, we said that we select 3 focus areas. One is digital transformation. And it starts with, Hungary is full of very smart mathematicians, starts with deep mathematics, which is the heart of AI, quantum, you name it. Then green transformation is no question, but in the green we mean not only energy, but water, agrarian issues and those things. And last but not least is I would call it the health questions, aging, longevity, pandemics, and these kind of things. So we decided as a government that we will focus our efforts, our money, our infrastructure development, and our regulation to help this ecosystem. And the good thing was that the higher education belonged to me. Today, Hungary has a very strong manufacturing platform. American companies, Chinese companies, German companies, French companies are all there and manufacturing high-tech products. To support that, obviously, we need talents, engineers and researchers. And in the Hungarian higher education system, some 13% of the students are already foreign students. That's in the top 15 countries in the world, out of the, say, UN 200 countries. While Hungary's size is 95th in population or territory. So we are punching above our weight. But our goal is that by 2030, we will increase this number to 20% plus. Because if you want to develop a strong manufacturing base, you have to have a knowledge base. You have to nurture and develop those engineers and those experts who will be able to work there. Not necessarily just on research. The research ecosystem is important. What we did, that all government money, any penny that is spent on innovation, will be spent on projects where clearly demonstrated that there is a cooperation, association between the corporate sector, research institutes, and universities. Because the university students should see corporate guys walking on the corridors and researchers. MIT in Boston was made based on that idea. So this, focusing on fields, focusing the money to follow the policies, and I would say over the years, and obviously my predecessors, this is a new ministry, but there was Ministry for Innovation, the number of patents, publications grew significantly. So there is a response. We are far away. Just to give you some European numbers, in Europe, the best innovators spend some 3% of their GDP on innovation.
Yes.
2/3 of that usually comes from the private sector, 1/3 from the government. But and in Hungary, we are at around 1.5%. But the very interesting indicator that in Europe, in the best countries like the Netherlands, Austria, and others, they have some 1,000 researchers per 1 million inhabitants.
Oh, wow, okay.
1,000 per 1 million inhabitants. We are 2/3 of way through that. Because most probably you know, ideas happen not when you sit alone at the dinner table, but when you mingle with your colleagues at the printing machine or the coffee shop. because you trigger each other's thoughts.
Mr. Csak, so if I were to summarize it, what I understand is that there is would you say that there's an equal focus that's required on both building the knowledge base as well as having in-house or rather, talent within your country that can convert that knowledge into manufacturing units? If you were to say to any country, give your opinion or suggestion, what is the weightage that you would give to each of those aspects? How much should a country focus on knowledge and R&D, and how much should one focus on setting up those manufacturing units and other factories and in making infrastructure that actually invites companies from abroad?
Rather than answering how we do it, this morning we heard the former Canadian Prime Minister, and he talked about China's rise, both in manufacturing and in research and innovation. Because the two goes hand in hand. If you look at President Trump's speeches, what he says that in the US, they have to somehow reestablish the American manufacturing base. I have my doubts because the skilled workers are not there, and there are many questions around that. But the US clearly is a leader in innovation and research. Yes. But if you don't have then the application in manufacturing, that you won't have a balance. Now, in Hungary, we woke up, I would say, 15, 20 years ago, and we said that, okay, it's not fancy to have factories, and these are very modern factories, by the way. It's not fancy, but if we want to support the research and create room for the research, we need manufacturing. And we started inviting manufacturing corporations. There are only, I would say, 3-4 countries in Europe where the manufacturing as a percentage of the GDP is above 20%.
Wow.
30 years ago, even in the UK, it was 20+%. Today in the UK, it's 7-8%. Mm-hmm. So then you are very much reliant on imports. And think about the pandemic or any disruption in the global value chains, you are in trouble. So you have to have both sides. And I think each country has this potential. I would say the most important is that while politicians create this manufacturing base, in parallel, you have to create the ecosystem that nurtures potential new talents, and that's the universities.
Okay, interesting. So that's the universities, you said, for the talent. I will come to that point in just a second, but you also mentioned the slump that the entire world witnessed during the COVID-19 pandemic. In a way, all of humanity was together fighting that pandemic. I want to understand from your perspective, you raised an important statistic about manufacturing as part of as percentage of the GDP, and how it was 20+% many years back. However, it's come down. Do you feel that was the reason why several European nations have actually been facing the economic slump ever since COVID-19 happened, because they didn't give enough emphasis to both the pillars, as you've mentioned, to manufacturing as well as knowledge and R&D?
There were several factors. For example, in Germany, the problem was that the Mittelstand, the mid-sized corporations, the next generation or the third generation is not interested. So they are selling, and most probably the buyers just buy the market and shut down the thing. I think the most critical issue was that in Europe, many people fell in love with the green transition.
Yeah. Yes.
So that meant that manufacturing, and from the US as well, manufacturing went to China and other places. But if you think about in China, the energy production, I would say 80% is from coal. Pretty dirty. while in Europe it's natural gas or nuclear or that kind of stuff. So when we relocated the manufacturing, we actually worsened the global atmosphere. So, and plus the social problems that local people lost their jobs, tax revenue dropped. So there is a chain of reaction or effect in it. I think we are in India, and we Hungarians, we came from Asia, and we are very proud of that. We think about kind of balances, and each country has to have his or own balance. And India is a special case because you are at this stage of your development where you can make decisions.
Yes.
And you have the economic growth to support the government to create an innovation and culture ministry and focus on creating the potential, both in manufacturing and in education, higher education in particular.
Very interesting, and I want you to help elaborate on that aspect as well. So what role do you think India would perhaps play as far as innovation is concerned in the coming decade, in your experience or in your understanding of where India stands today?
I think the most important thing is association, corporations, research institutes, universities, and governments. But now, thanks God, we are not living in a world where each country is a closed entity. India is in the best position because you have many people who studied in the UK, Europe. We have many Indian students in Hungary as well, US. So I think India is uniquely positioned to be a center of global cooperation. In Singapore, for example, the National University of Singapore 15 years ago or so established a new institute called CREATE. And that was an institute which the role is to invite world-class universities to Singapore to work together with Singaporean researchers. Okay. So Stanford and Munich Technology University and others are there. And that's where you can play a role. I visited Bangalore, the Technical University and the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies. You have huge potential and you have the people who understand the world. Now the question is whether you can bring projects here. Mm-hmm. And you can bring people to live here to see for themselves. For example, I, as a minister, I established kind of scholarships, 3 to 5 years. You can bring your whole family to Hungary and work together with Hungarian researchers, and not only Hungarian researchers, and corporations. Again, association, ecosystem.
So, Ms. Csak, we were earlier discussing about this aspect of collaboration, and we were talking about innovation for humanity as a whole. You've elaborated on India's role, but if you were to advise the Indian government a little bit more on what would it possibly take to take that collaboration forward, what would your advice be?
My background is economics and sociology, and I believe in institutions and incentives. Mm-hmm. So, for example, when a government spends money on supporting research or development, the condition should be that corporations, universities, and research institutes are involved. And this is not a new model. It's in the US, if you look at the NASA or the Pentagon, they do the same. It's fascinating what can happen when corporate guys, university professors, students, and researchers meet. And first, it was very hard because it was like silos. People don't want to, this is my piece of cake, so don't touch it. I think those countries who are the quickest in breaking down or pulling down those walls or silos will be most successful. And again, just as we did, you have to look back and see where India has been successful anyway, where you have schools of knowledge or champions of things. I used to work with Tata Group, Jamshedpur, you know, that's
Yes.
a 150 years old story, and what a story. In 2000, the company was $10 billion market cap, and now 100 plus. So the whole world is for you.
Yes. Mr. Csak, you also raised a very pertinent point earlier when you gave the example of moving the manufacturing hubs to China, where initially the idea was to focus on green energy, but the whole point of green energy is to obviously not then expend electricity which is based on coal. How does then the world, or how does Hungary perhaps strike the balance between in this sort of a situation where you definitely want to innovate, but you end up in a situation where the innovation, as you mentioned, could possibly be hampering the world more? How does one strike that balance?
I don't think that there is an answer for that, because luckily these developments happen based upon the actions of many countries and many people. In case of China, back in the 1970s, when Kissinger and Richard Nixon opened up China through the WTO, joining China and recently, what happened that China first was obviously a copycat. And then, as they successfully elevated the poor parts of this society, there was a growing domestic demand. And by size, it was very lucrative. So therefore, Chinese entrepreneurs started producing in the digital sphere to the cars and anything in between. And now, what you see that many Western companies, Buick, Volkswagen, BMW, they are not competitive on the Chinese market. BYD and the others are coming, and Huawei. And the Chinese did an interesting thing, because they, while, for example, in the US, the AI and the digital products were focused rather on the household consumption, your phones and the apps on it. And for example, for the big American companies, 80% of the revenue comes from that market, Meta and others. In China, 80% comes from corporate markets, which means automation. We are lagging behind. There is a Swedish company, Ericsson. Ericsson established only 4 years ago a task force, a global task force for corporate solutions of 5G and automation. So we are lagging behind in terms of thinking. But in my opinion, competition is good, because it wakes you up. We will see what's going to happen in the US. How to turn that country a place where the FDI is coming in rather than going out. And in that sense, Asia, India, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, these countries are, I think, will show their teeth in this competition. At this stage, Vietnam and other places, Thailand, they accommodate Chinese investment to pass by the American sanctions, but that means that the knowledge will be there. The wage will be earned by people. that means that they will have demand. And there is a much wider question behind your question, and I don't think that we want to go into that, but back in the 80s and the 90s, in Western Europe and in the US, there was a overwhelming agreement that market economy and democracy should go hand in hand and cannot go separately. The last 40 years of history shows differently. So the social sciences are lagging far behind in terms of understanding how come and how far a market economy can work within a non-democratic, in our sense, non-democratic system. And the best example is the China-India rivalry. Huge countries, huge population. Let's see.
Mr. Csak, I also want to understand from your perspective, when you talk about some ambitions that have been laid down by President Donald Trump for the United States of America, where a huge part of the Make America Great Again campaign is to make sure that the jobs remain in America and with Americans, and to make sure that that there is an equality in terms of the tariffs that are being imposed on other countries. Do you really think that America will be able to achieve that under President Donald Trump's leadership?
That's the billion-dollar question. But if you look at the fact that a increased portion of the Latino, Hispanic society voted for President Trump, means that those people are first, maximum second or third generation. They want to work. And I believe in the wisdom of the constituency. If they believed that President Trump can deliver, and if they, and I know that they are very hard workers, first on the plantation, but second in the schools or in the army, and then in the manufacturing jobs, I am pretty hopeful, not for Hungary, for the world. Because over the last 250 years, next year will be the 250th anniversary of the establishment of the United States, the United States has always been a pioneer in new solutions, innovation as well. There is no country where an idea becomes a product quicker than in the US. Craziness as well. But looking at the new secretaries, Scott Bessent and the new energy minister, I think there is a consistent thinking, not like in the first term of Trump in 2016. So I think all these tariffs and other things should be somehow settled, I would say, by the mid-summer in the US. Because the tariffs will hurt American customers. Inflation will increase. And one of the key reasons why Biden or Kamala Harris lost was the last 4 years inflation for the customers. So therefore, some signs of results should be seen. And next year, the 250th anniversary and the midterm elections. So the period is pretty short, and the credibility is hard to win, but very easy to lose. Yes. And I think they are pretty focused.
Mr. Csak, my last question to you. I want to understand from you, you also raised earlier the point that for innovation to be for humanity, it is important for collaboration, and you gave examples of how Hungary is achieving that by creating universities, by inviting foreign students, by inviting people, innovators and their families to come live in Hungary and to collaborate with other researchers as well. but in today's political climate globally, where there is a lot of debate, discussion, question on whether jobs should stay with the natives of a certain land and whether people from outside should be allowed, what sort of jobs those people will be doing. I just want to understand from your perspective, do you feel that somewhere the current political climate could in a way hamper or impact innovation and innovative collaboration?
I would say at the top notch of research, I don't really see problems in international cooperation and, exchange of people. The question will be, where will be the demarcation, and whether geographically or fields. For example, the French government opens huge research facilities, including nuclear and AI, in China.
Right.
Americans don't like it. But the Americans don't like many things. For example, they don't like India importing oil from Russia. So you have to have a good case and argumentation, what is good, what is bad. When it comes to national security, then the ball stops. And the smaller countries like Hungary, we believe we cannot survive in a world that is cut into parts. We have always been in the center of people's movement, north, south, east, west. So this is our interest. We want to be a place of connection. For us, if there is a very strong demarcation, that means that Hungary might become periphery, as we were in the Cold War. But if there is a global decoupling, so to say, then India's potential will be crippled as well. So this is why I'm saying, I told it to a reporter, that India has not only economically, scientifically and intellectually, but politically has a very significant role in the world. Because if my prime minister talks to President Trump and they are good friends, a country of 10 million talks. If a country of 1.5 billion talks, that usually being heard. So that's my advice, that India is a 5,000 plus years old culture. Proud and full of experiences. And I'm not saying that you are shy because you've been performing in the international diplomacy and other fields greatly, but the world needs you.
Okay. Well, Mr. Csak, that's all the time that we have for this wonderful conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, a huge round of applause for Mr. Janos Csak for joining us at the NXT Conclave. It's been a wonderful, wonderful session on Next in Innovation.